Welcome to your key discovery point. I am Burney from Nextpoint, joined by Doug Austin of eDiscovery today. Doug, you had an interesting post about a week ago now where you did a little experiment. You were using a tool to try to see if the tool could detect whether content, and we're talking mostly about text content here, right, was human generated or AI generated. And I just thought this was hilarious when I looked at your results. But what an interesting experiment here.
Yeah, the kind of the idea for the test came out of another podcast I was recording, the AI Discovered podcast that I do with Stephen Herrera, Stephanie Clerkin, and normally Nick Wittenberg, but David Horgan sat in for him this last
Okay,
session. And we were
great.
talking about AI detectors, and and one of the ones that was mentioned was ZeroGPT, and I think a couple of us were like, "Yeah, we
Ah,
should do a test." And I thought, well, I have a few writing samples that I could maybe look at.
just a
So
few.
one or two. So I thought, yeah, I'll do a test. So I decided to do kind of three tests. The first one was a blog post written by me, and I tried to. I
Okay,
went back to a fairly in-depth one I've used before in other tests, which was the one I wrote to compare the BlackBerry lesson when the iPhone replaced it and it didn't respond to, the Gen AI revolution. And that one was, of course, totally written by me. So I ran through the raw text of it, right down to the paragraph that went to PS, and basically the results were that it said yes, almost all of it was human written. It did
okay,
flag two paragraphs that said it thought those were AI written, even though they were not AI written. They were 100%, it was all 100% human written. So, it got a little bit of AI thought in there, but, not too bad. Almost 95% it agreed was human written. So I thought,
yeah.
okay,
Well,
that's
that
a good
tells me
sign.
that Doug Austin is 5% AI. So
Yeah,
that's the way I
maybe.
turn. I turn.
Maybe yeah, personality wise, and maybe a lot more than that. But yeah. So then the second one I did was I decided to take content written by Notebook LM, and I picked another
Okay,
blog post, but one where they had done loaded 15 articles into Notebook LM and had it generated a briefing document about
gotcha.
deep. And what I did was I took the briefing document result that it published, and I put that into Zero GPT, and that was 100% AI generated. Yet it thought that 83% of it was human written, which it
Oh,
wasn't. So
wow.
it
Okay.
flagged about I think three paragraphs or so, the first paragraph and a couple of others. But it definitely still thought a lot of it was human generated, which was interesting. Then when it occurred to me that well, Zero GPT calls out its detection capabilities with Chat GPT, I thought, well, I should do an example from that. So I had actually I'm working on something where I may talk a little bit about the NRA broiler chicken antitrust litigation case
Hmm.
validation protocol. And so I had asked GPT about it, and it gave me a blurb about it. And so I decided to load that in. And when I loaded that in, it was the closest to saying this was AI generated at
Oh, okay.
27.69%, but that still leaves about 72 plus percent that it thinks is human written, even though it wasn't. It was written by ChatGPT 4.0. So, not necessarily a very scientific case, but one of the things I think it illustrates is that these AI detectors are not that accurate. And I'm not just,
Right.
and I think Zero GPT is just one example. I think you get probably similar results with the others out there. And one of the things that I know I've seen, that folks like Maura Grossman and Judge Grimm and folks are talking about a lot about deep fakes and the idea of kind of, how do you deal
Right.
with deep fakes? You're not going to be able to rely on the AI detectors to do it because they just can't differentiate it. So I think that's from a standpoint of how this could impact e-discovery. I think that's the key. So when it comes to the text you you see, and whether it's AI generated or any content you see, don't necessarily rely on a tool to determine it for you.
That's so interesting. And my thoughts are, first of all, can humans detect whether it's human generated or AI generated? I think in some cases, we've all seen examples that look a little crazy, and there's some very obvious examples. But I think specifically, even in the text, especially when we come with large language models and things, Doug, that I feel like that's going to be the area where it's going to get harder and harder to detect it from a human standpoint. Right now, I think when we talk about images and videos, I think a lot of humans right now can probably tell the difference. There's like different shadows, and the fingers are a little longer than they should be. That kind of stuff like that. But when it comes to text, I just feel like this is going to be a little bit harder. So then we're relying on AI to detect whether it's AI generated or human generated. So we're asking AI to be its own detective in some aspects.
Right.
But you're right. My mind just starts swirling out of control here, thinking about the things you're talking about when it comes to, we call it deep fakes, but kind of any fakes, right? Just the idea that it could be, I mean, we've always had evidence that has been, generated or fake evidence, right? We've always had some of those issues. So in that aspect, it's nothing new, but it's just so much better now, it feels like, and it's just harder and harder. And if this was so interesting to see these experiments here, and you're just kind of highlighting the fact that it's not good. I mean, if you didn't know this content that you put in, you would you take it at face value here? I mean, I think a lot of people would. So thanks for doing this. I just thought this was a really good experiment that you walked through here.
Oh, you bet, Brett. And I mean, I definitely think there are, maybe from a human standpoint detection, there may be some telltale signs that might hint to something being AI generated. I've definitely read certain things that I feel like, okay,
Okay.
that looks
Okay.
like it's AI generated, but you can't know 100%. And I would also
Yeah.
say that the images and the videos and the audio files are a lot. They've become a lot more high quality. I mean, there are some the deepfake
Yeah.
videos circulating around that, I mean, are totally AI generated, and you would have no idea that they were AI generated. They look just like anybody else. So it's amazing. The technology's there to really do some serious deep faking, and I definitely think it's going to be one of the biggest issues that legal and e-discovery professionals are going to have to deal with.
I feel like that's another profession. If you want to become an AI detective, that, that could be a role you could try to look for in your career, maybe. I found this podcast. If you want to hear just a little bit more, if you were, I don't know if you remember this, Doug. It was about a year ago. You and I did a podcast with EDRM. We talked about a variety of things, but including we did kind of talk a little bit about the deepfake evidence and some of those challenges and implications. So I'll put that link in the show notes. Podcast. It was like a mid-year legal tech trends with you and me and Mary and Kaylee, which I just thought was that went really well. So just want to let people know there. So I guess their key discovery point today: just be wary of AI detectors. We don't take them for its word, and maybe test everything. I mean, we've always had that mantra, right? It's that we need to test everything and ask questions. But wow, we're just kind of putting a little bit of a different spin on there. Thanks for joining us today, Doug.
Right. Thank you, Brett, and thanks everybody.